The 48 hours following the memorandum were a study in controlled friction. Every second was accounted for. Every movement was deliberate. Equipment was checked, rechecked, and checked again. In the quiet of the barracks, the only sound was the mechanical snap of rifle bolts and the low hum of preparation. Sarah stood in a secure room at JSOC. The operational package was finally open. 12 targets, a labyrinth of urban alleys. The intelligence was sharp, but the environment was unforgiving. The mission was named Urban Threshold. It wasn't just about the targets, it was about the variables. The people watching from above wanted a clean win. Sarah wanted her men back. She watched Webb and Holt. The bridges she had built were holding. They weren't just a unit anymore, they were a singular mechanism. Purposeful, synchronized. Captain Mercer remained a shadow in the periphery. His support was institutional, his eyes calculating. He knew the stakes. If the threshold was crossed incorrectly, the cost would be total. Sarah felt the weight, not just of the mission, but of the narrative they were ready to write if she failed. The experiment, the first time. She didn't let it show. The 48 hours ended. There were no more repetitions, no more drills, only the mission. They filed into the transport, shadows merging into the dark. Inside, the red light turned the interior into a chamber of focused aggression. The stillness she had first felt behind a rifle in Laredo was here now. Total. Absolute. Urban Threshold was no longer a plan on paper. It was a grid of heat, noise, and high-stakes choices. They were crossing the line. Sarah Mitchell looked at her men one last time. She didn't need to say a word. The work of 6 weeks was about to be tested in 6 minutes of chaos. Professionalism isn't just a routine, it's a shield. And they were well armored. The threshold was ahead. The assignment was live. They moved into the shadows of the city, silent, invisible. The ground report continues as the mission unfolds. Precision is the only language spoken here. The threshold has been crossed. Success or failure is now a matter of seconds. This has been the ground report. Good night.
3 weeks after the operation, Sarah received a visitor she had not expected. She was on the range when the message came through, a request to meet a civilian named Dr. Karen Hale. In a place where information was currency, the absence of context was its own message. She cleaned her equipment with the automatic care of a professional and walked to the meeting at the appointed time. Dr. Hale was attached to a joint task force that operated under a name that didn't appear on most charts. She was there to evaluate the unconventional capabilities Sarah had built within her unit. Hale didn't open her folder. She was interested in how Sarah built the unit, the assessment design, the individual approach to operators, and particularly the adapted shot. "We've been watching a pattern," Hale said. "The best operational outcomes are almost never produced by the most individually talented people. They're produced by commanders who know how to develop collective capability." "You demonstrated that," Hale continued. "Commanders who build units that scale under pressure." Sarah simply replied, "The unit did." Hale's smile was brief and precise. "That's what I mean," she said. The conversation lasted 90 minutes, ranging across philosophy and trust. Before leaving, Hale noted that many thought Sarah's appointment was a mistake. They were wrong. "You've changed a conversation that needed to change." Sarah sat in the empty room after, thinking. She had built the unit the way she did because it was right, because she knew the brittleness created when commanders treat operators as instruments rather than people. Hale's words put language around something Sarah had been doing by instinct. Having that language made it available in a new way. She could teach it now, more precisely, to produce change across a whole system. Back on the range, she watched her team. This was the part hardest to explain, the way units become something different from the sum of their parts. The judgment of 11 people in coordination is functionally superior. When trust is real, the system makes better decisions, faster, under higher pressure. She had built that in 6 weeks, starting from a broken place. She let herself feel a quiet, private pride. That evening, she wrote a long letter to her father. She told him the thing he had seen in her when she was 17 was still there, that it had grown into something she couldn't have imagined. She went to sleep thinking about what came next, The next training cycle, the institution's slow movement towards something better. She thought about it all, let it go, and slept.
The first shot broke the city's silence at exactly 4 minutes and 17 seconds past the operational window. It was Sarah's shot. Her first target was 480 meters out. She held the calculation with the relaxed certainty of a master. The shot landed. Coordination was near perfect. 4 targets down. The network froze, instinctively moving toward each other, right into Sarah's mapped fields of fire. But something shifted. A target moved into cover, a deviation the model hadn't predicted. Sarah heard the silence where a shot should have been. 610 meters on a moving partial target. No model for this, only the weight of everything she'd ever learned. The target stopped moving. 2 clicks on the radio meant a covered target. She gave one back, handled. 12 targets neutralized. No civilian casualties. Friendly security maintained. In the vehicle, Webb spoke quietly. There are maybe 10 people in the world who make that shot. Sarah looked at him. Good work tonight. The vehicle drove on. Sarah sat with her unit in the dark and let the silence be what it was.
The unit had 11 men, and Sarah Mitchell was about to find out exactly what they were made of. She spent her first 2 days reading, methodical, like a surgeon studying scans before making the first cut. She needed to understand who these men were before she could lead them anywhere, their backgrounds, deployments, commendations. She read all of it, twice. What she found was a unit with serious talent buried under serious dysfunction. A team that had forgotten how to be one. Their previous commander, Decker, had been removed after nearly getting 2 men killed. He'd been reassigned to a desk. Trust, once broken in a unit like this, didn't repair itself. It was a fracture that ran through everything they did. On her 3rd morning, she walked into the briefing room. 11 men, every one of them impressive, and every one of them isolated. The older operators sat on one side, angled away. The younger ones clustered near the door, keeping their exits clear. Trust was gone. This was not a team. It was a collection of individuals wearing the same uniform. And Sarah knew she had to change that. She didn't introduce herself with a list of medals. Authority wasn't established by telling. It was established by showing. First, she was their commander. She didn't care what they thought of her gender. That conversation was over before it began. Second, she was going to work with them until they trusted each other again. No motivational speeches, just the work. Third, a full unit assessment in 1 week. Marksmanship, physicals, decisions. She would take it herself. Same standard for everyone. Webb stayed behind. 17 years of service. A man who had seen enough to recognize another who had been through the fire. He looked at her and said, "You know what you're walking into?" It wasn't a question. She answered it anyway. "I always do." Webb was the center of gravity. If she earned his respect, it would travel. If she didn't, the unit was lost. She had 1 week. The men watched her, carefully, trying to figure out what she actually was before they decided to follow. She ran at 5, armory by 6, range by 7, consistent, precise. She was building a record, 1 morning at a time. It wasn't about drama, it was about who she actually was, and slowly, the unit began to notice. By the 5th day, Gonzalez joined her. They didn't speak, but he came back, and then others followed. Pressure was building. Assessment day, 31 degrees. The wind was spiked and unpredictable, exactly the conditions she wanted. She settled into position. Longer distances, shorter windows, no excuses. The Mitchell Standard was officially in session. She found the first target at 600 meters, she breathed out, and went to work.
The city received them the way cities in conflict zones always received people who did not belong there, with indifference layered over danger. They inserted at night 2 kilometers from the operational area and moved on foot through back streets and narrow alleys. A light was on in a second-floor window, and Sarah could see a shadow moving behind the curtain, someone awake for reasons she did not need to know. They moved in silence. The communication happened through hand signals and the practiced coordination of people who had rehearsed until it lived in their bodies. She was at the front of the column. A commander who led from the front did not need to tell people she led from the front. The message was delivered by the position of her boots. The message was already delivered by the position of her boots in the dark. It took 45 minutes to reach their staging point, a partially collapsed structure 2 blocks from the primary target location. Its upper floors were accessible by an interior staircase that was unstable but passable. From there, the team dispersed to their 5 positions. Sarah went with Webb to the highest position because she had done a personal reconnaissance and knew exactly how to handle it. Webb followed her up. The view opened up across the rooftops toward the target area. At this hour, it was quiet. Sarah set up her position while Webb set up his. Neither spoke. She checked her rangefinder, confirmed distances, and adjusted her scope with the routine efficiency of someone performing tasks so well practiced they no longer require thought. She looked at her watch. 2 hours and 51 minutes until the operational window opened. She settled in to wait. The waiting was harder than the doing. The doing was fast. The waiting was when you sat with the full weight of what you were about to do, and either you held it or it held you. She thought about the people below her moving through their evening. She did not make it abstract. She did it with open eyes. That was harder, and it was the right way. An hour before the window, her radio gave a single click, the signal from each position confirming they were set. All positions occupied, all operators ready. 30 minutes before the window, the targets appeared. They felt safe because they had survived this long, but that false confidence was ultimately always fatal. At the 1-minute mark, intel confirmed. All targets located. 30 seconds, a slow breath in. 10 seconds. She found her first target in the scope. 5 seconds. The signal came. Everything had been building toward this.
6 months after Sarah Reyes walked through the gate at the Virginia base, she stood in a room filled with senior leadership. No longer a mistake, but a master of her craft. She presented on unit development, how she had rebuilt trust and identified latent capability in operators whose records had undersold them. She was precise, concrete, and unshakable. When offered a broader role in training doctrine, she refused. "Not yet," she said. "The unit work isn't finished." She wouldn't leave Holt or Gonzalez in the middle. Her record was extraordinary, but she thought of the small acts. Sitting beside Holt on a bench, Gonzalez arriving early at the range, Webb choosing to tell the truth. These were the moments that mattered. The doubt that followed her through the gate had closed, not with a speech, but through the accumulation of evidence that could not be argued with. Webb had said it directly. "I was wrong." She walked back to the unit, back to the work, with a certainty that had never let her down. None of it would stop her. It hadn't. It never had. It never would. The classified briefing lasted 4 hours. Sarah sat in a room with no windows, in a building that didn't appear on the base map, surrounded by officers and commanders. The air was thick with the weight of decisions already made, handed down in the form of coordinates, timelines, and photographs of men who would not survive the week. The target was a command cell in Syria responsible for attacks across 3 countries. They had acquired materials of significant concern. The window was 72 hours. The cell would fragment and disperse after that. Their pattern suggested they knew someone was close. Sarah studied the overhead imagery for a long time. The city was dense, layers of civilian population woven through the environment like a fabric that could not be separated from the threat without destroying it. In a training range, targets were simple, paper and steel, controlled conditions. In places like this, the margin for error was non-existent. 12 individuals. Simultaneous action was required across all 12. If anyone received warning, the others would disappear into the city within minutes. The plan required 5 elevated points. They had a window of approximately 11 minutes when all 12 targets would be at predictable locations. Sarah spent the rest of the briefing asking precise questions. Intelligence, confidence levels, contingency plans, and exfiltration routes. The analysts looked at her with professional respect. One senior analyst told her afterward that her thinking was the best he'd seen in 18 months. The next 40 hours were the most important. She briefed her operators in full, walking them through every detail with the kind of discipline that left no room for assumption. She ran positions twice, then again after sleeping on it. Decisions made after reflection were almost always better than those made in the heat of the first pass. Webb took the most complex field of fire, Gonzalez was placed at the critical meeting point where 4 senior members needed to be addressed in 2 seconds. She debated Holt for almost an hour. His failure had been psychological, not technical. He was ready, but sending a man into his first engagement was never a light decision. She assigned him to the simplest position. Enough real experience to begin closing the gap, but not enough to break him if something shifted. She sat with them one at a time, asking questions rather than delivering instructions. She listened to every answer, a leader giving her full attention. On the final night, she went through the operation in her mind, systematically mapping responses to every deviation. Then she put it all aside and went to sleep. She woke at 3, checked her unit, and moved through the room with quiet acknowledgement. At 5 in the morning, they loaded the transport. She was the last one on.